Hello, party people. Party JavaScript people, maybe.
Yes.
Hope so.
Party CSS people.
Anomaly
HTML people.
Yeah, well, today is dedicated to JavaScript. And that's because we're here to talk about advanced JavaScript techniques with senior developer Michael in the house.
Yeah.
Yes, we're going to be talking about all sorts of exciting things, such as closures and scope.
My favorite.
Prototypes, async await, functional programming, objects, maps, classes, the DOM, and
the DOM.
Yeah, modern JavaScript tooling such as transpilers, bundlers, and all the rest of it.
Yes.
And
answer your questions.
Yes, definitely. Any questions you may have on these topics or other JavaScript topics, doesn't have to be limited to that, drop them in the chat and we'll do our very best to answer them.
Correct.
Thank you all for coming along. Josh C has dropped a line into the chat.
Yes.
That's because we run a weekly poll, which is, if you're new here, please put a bunny rabbit into the chat. Yeah. And if you've been before, hit me with that tiger. Like, you may be thinking, so what's with the lion? The lion is the regular attendee lion. So there's no hard and fast rule for this. If you just consider yourself a regular attendee.
That's right. This is the third option. And if you're from Colchester, it's an elephant.
Yes, really, you can put anything. But let me know where you're tuning on in from. Some of you have already done that. We have India, Berlin, India. Woohoo! Watching on YouTube. Okay.
Yes.
Iranian JavaScript community.
Wow.
And who said hello to you all and Nigeria.
Nice.
Good to have you all here.
Awesome.
So, oh, look at this. Montreal. Bunny rabbits and tigers coming on into the chat. Wonderful.
Yeah, well done.
And I suppose I ought to mention, just in case you haven't come across us before, if you're one of those bunny rabbits, indeed, like...
Yes. Who are we, Leanne?
We are Leanne and Michael from Scrimbo. Yes.
I'm Michael, she's Leanne.
Just to clear, yeah.
Yes.
Good to clear it up. Scrimbo, here's our tagline. Don't spend 15k on a coding bootcamp. That is because you can learn to code with us for much cheaper.
Yes.
Including with this JavaScript deep dive course, which we'll be looking at a little bit today. Includes some of the topics we are focusing on, and our front-end developer career path, which aims to teach you everything you need to know to get hired as a junior developer. So check that out after this stream, should that interest you.
Yes.
So.
Oh, and if you're looking for more assistance with studying, we also run a bootcamp.
Indeed we do.
Yes.
The Scrimbo Bootcamp, which follows the career path, but gives you all sorts of lovely perks, such as building a network with your study groups, collaborating on group projects, which helps you learn about Git and all the rest of it, exclusive projects to beef up your portfolio, and code reviews. Yes,
that's right.
We are close to reaching the 1,000 code review milestone.
Nice.
I know. Exciting. Yes. So, Mark is 77% done with the front-end career path.
That's a good number.
Super cool.
Yeah. Well done.
Oh, look. There's lots of people tuning on in from South Africa and Nigeria.
Wow.
Lots of other places.
All over the world.
Yes. So, Michael.
Yes.
We want to talk about JS. Let's start with your favorite. Closures and scope. Is this really your favorite?
Yeah, I kind of do like closures and stuff. So I will, well, let's basically have a look at, so.
Need to reshare.
Oh, do we? Is that?
Not this.
No, not
There
that.
we are.
Yeah, okay, there we are. Perfect. Yeah, so I think with this course is pretty good because it indeed deep dives into all sorts of topics. And I think if you scroll to functions, it's free, by the way. So
This one is not free.
oh no, it's not. Okay.
Delete the last 10 seconds.
Whoops.
This is
Yes.
part of our pro package.
Yes. Which is purchase power parity and stuff like that. So we can't tell you exactly how much it costs because it costs different places in different countries.
Yes.
But yeah, go ahead to the page and check out how much it is in your location. Yeah, both functions, and then you will see closures and why it matters. So the point, so you're not logged in. Yeah, it will tell you to unroll. There you go. So with closures, you will have this kind of the syntax where you have a function. There is like an outer function which returns an inner function. I think. Also, do let me know if you want that zoomed in, zoomed out, or it's good enough, that kind of thing. But hopefully it's good. Anyway, so yeah, closure. You have an outer function that returns an inner function. As basically, this construction is called closure. Because it closes over an inner scope. So this variable is scoped just to this handle light post function over here. And this function has access to it, but it doesn't have access to any other things, anything outside of the closure. And it's quite useful because quite often in JavaScript, when you start learning, you end up writing a lot of variables and functions that, mutate variables and stuff like that. So quite often you just want something a little bit more certain that it will not update things that you do not intend to update.
Mm-hmm.
So
and that's what this provides.
And that's what that provides, indeed. So I can see that there is a question like, what is step? Good one. So step here is a variable, right? That is passed as it's basically an argument that is passed to closure. So what you can do is you can create these like unique functions that have individual arguments. So for example, you can say const which is a light post, and you can say, you know what, when you want to, I have now created a function that basically increments by 1 like or increments by 2 likes, right? Depending on how I pass that. So I can say, for example, console log like, console log double like, and console log double like again. So you can probably try to guess what's going to happen, right? So one function, and all of those have access to the same variable.
Yeah.
Right. So it's basically you can create this like combinations of different functions that all act on the same scope without worrying too much that something else is going to come into the mix and it's all going to mess it up, like with global variables. So you're effectively trying to narrow down the scope of the impact of your functions. It's just for, if you're particularly worried about messing something up, closures is like a clean way of, just wrap it in the closure. Here's your variable, here's your function. Pass it a couple of arguments, and it's nice and clean interface to work with. So if you want to guess how many likes we're going to have in the end?
I'm going to go for 6.
Why?
Because it's the bottom one in the console.
No, but that's the old console log.
Okay,
Yeah.
Well, go on then. Surprise me.
Okay, so that's okay. So we have 4, where we have basically, because we start with 0, right? We increment it by 1.
Yep.
Then we have a double like 2, and then we have a double like, which is 4.
So
that
incremented
one,
it by 1, so that's 1 like.
yeah. So
now-
this closure here has its own like count, and these closures have their own like count.
Right. Okay.
So let me also, so I can do that. I'll also show like count. Like count. I think that'll do it. Right, so you start with 0, and they both start with 0. And then because they only run once, you have that. But if I also go and show here, that's the function that gets executed. Because we return it, that's the function that actually gets executed. See, so that part gets run only once. It's like a setter. Right. So we have had 1, 1, so they're separate variables.
So this hopefully will clear up VJ's question, which I had the same question. Shouldn't it be 5? 1 plus
Okay, so
2 plus 2.
yeah, so the benefit of closures is because once you create, because notice that here we say handle like pose, that returns a function that has its own scope.
Mm-hmm.
So that has its own like count separate from double like count.
Yeah.
So they live independently.
Good.
And that's why closures will be super neat.
So would you say closures are something you're expected to use as standard?
So that's where my next favorite bit comes in, because yes, once you get to React, you will be using closures all the time.
Right.
And mainly, there'll be React hooks. Right? So as soon as you say something like use state, that's effectively a closure. That has its own, that returns a function, which is set color, and it returns a thing that you are setting. So for example, if I were to, you can say something like, you can say set state, and it takes an argument state. And you can say return, so because you have also closure, which is in a state, you can say like, that's like your initial stuff, right? Or like, well, just, state, or it could be undefined. And then you say return. And then what you do is you can then return, you have to return 2 items, which is your color, right? And then the function.
Yeah.
Like what we did with handle likes. And then effectively that kind of like you return both the inner state of the closure and the closure itself. So you can reuse it all around.
Wow.
Yeah. So again, I was not the first one to come up with it, obviously. Well, React team came up with it.
So Vish says, "Wow, I didn't realize state is a closure."
So that brings me to my next favorite. I think there is an epic talk which basically does that. So Swix has gone to the conference, and in half an hour, he's basically recreating, basic React in a talk. And from there, you will see not just the practical application of closures and why they're useful, but also how useful they are. That you could have been using them for ages. You just never realized that that's what they are.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's something you use every day. You probably don't write your own closures from scratch much.
Right.
Unless, you need like a custom hook, right? So for example, if you want to create a custom hook that's for yourself, there you go. Now you know how to do that because you know how to create hooks.
if you've been using React, chances are you've been using closures, but maybe not realizing.
Yeah, it's just that in React, closures are called hooks. So, if they called it use closure, it probably would have been a bit more obvious, I suppose, in a way.
Yeah. Well, remember
Yeah,
that.
but
Closures are hooks. Good.
in React context, yeah, that's right.
Yes, very
Okay.
important. One question here from Laughter. Why do some people hate JavaScript? Now, maybe you in the chat can tell us. Why do some people hate JavaScript?
I don't know,
Or
it's amazing.
maybe you don't hate JavaScript and you love it, in which case, tell us why too. But Michael, firstly, what are your thoughts on JavaScript?
I like it.
Why?
I like it. It's quirky. I like to compare it to English language in general. So if English is not your favorite, it is not your first language, your other languages seem to be a little bit more, precise or something, or they do have a little bit more logical structure to it. And there is a lot of
Michael's saying that because English is not his first language.
right.
But...
Yeah. Yeah. And English can be a little bit quirky, and there are some things that make no sense, but you just have to roll with it. And I guess that's why I like JavaScript, because some things don't make sense.
And you just have to roll with it.
Yeah, you just have to roll with it. Like, for example, I think there is like a fairly famous website which is like WTF JavaScript.
I think I've seen this before.
Yeah, like if you compare two arrays, it just says false, and it doesn't make sense at first, but once you look into the logic of it, you go like, actually, yeah, there is some logic to that. It actually is fairly consistent in how illogical it sometimes can be. So yeah, it's quite fun.
Getting this.
All right, sorry, I didn't share my example. Right, yeah.
I'm pretty sure you were sharing it.
No, I think I cancelled it. Yeah, there you go. So console log.
Yeah, but for the closures, you were sharing.
Yeah, for the closures, I was sharing. No, I stopped it. Yeah, so if you compare it to your arrays, then it would.
And the reason for that, this might be completely wrong, is that because they're saved in separate parts of the memory or something?
That's right. Yeah. So they're not actually this. You're not comparing arrays by value. You're comparing array addresses, and they are indeed different. So, but that's to be fair, a lot of languages do that kind of thing. But usually, when you put like double equal sign like that, you're kind of expecting to compare things by value, because, for example, if you compare two strings. They're not compared by addresses, right? They're compared by values. Those are the kind of trips people up, because you compare things by values here, but not by values there. So,
Andrew's saying arrays are technically objects.
Well, we'll get there once we go to prototypes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Which are different memory spots. So you had two objects in there just now.
That's right.
So we, according to this, would expect it to be also false, which it is. Yay.
And if it's strictly equals, it's also false. Yeah.
Yes. Very good.
Ooh, I quite like that one. We hate it because 9 plus 1, 91. But 91 minus 1? What?
Is it?
So what? 9 is a string. Am I reading that right? No, 9 is a number.
Yeah, and then
plus
1 is a string.
1 is a string.
All right.
That is indeed 91. Yeah, fair enough. I kind of expected that. But
copy it down and share it next to each other.
Yeah.
91 minus string 1. So, what's happened here? In the first one, it's converted the string 1 to...
right. Okay, it concatenated them, because I think that would be easier to do it like that. So const. I think I'll just do that. And then I will console log type of dot. And yeah, so it concatenates it into a string,
Right.
right? But that it converts it to a number.
So with the plus, it's not converting it.
Yeah, because plus can be used as you can say like
with any phrase really.
Yeah, with the plus you can say A plus B and it will put two letters together. But if you say but with a minus, what does that mean? Like I mean, can you do A B minus B? No, you can't. There you go. See, so again, there is some kind of logic to that, Yeah, because plus and minus are kind of the opposite mathematically, but in terms of JavaScript, considering that you can do multiple things with plus, you kind of have to pick one or the other from time to time. So minus is, plus and minus are not direct opposites because they contextually can be different.
As Andrew puts it,
yeah,
it's concatenating the string because of the plus and doing the math on the minus.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you see there are multiple contexts while there is only one context for minus. And yeah, so I think closures would be applied if you declare with let. Indeed, yes. And then, well, to be fair, you can use a var,
So this was Jerry's question, to which VJ? Yeah, just answered. So if I understand correctly, the key for a closure is to store it in a const? Well, you don't have to.
Oh, it doesn't matter, because basically the point of a closure is that you can return function as a value that you can then do whatever you need to with. You can pass that value somewhere else. You can invoke it with some arguments. It's up to you.
Michael Limb has summarized our plus minus business nicely.
Yes.
The plus operator has meaning with respect to string types. The minus operator does not. That's why there's different behavior. Wow.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Indeed.
Someone earlier said we have a lot of reverb and we should consider a carpet. I in fact have a carpet.
Yes.
So
but it's only on the floor.
Yes. Maybe we should do the walls as well.
Yeah.
Sorry if there is reverb. Let us know. Okay, moving on. Where shall we go next? I'll let you choose because you're the.
Oh yeah. So
you're in the driving seat.
Yeah. The next thing I think I'm also going to share is obviously one of my favorite resources, and that will be if you need a concept, then you just go to this book on GitHub. It's free. It's available right there. It's you don't know JavaScript?
A book on GitHub.
Indeed.
How does that work?
You can buy it as well if you want to support the author. But if you in a pinch and you need to research something, then you just go straight to the address. You can actually just type YDNJS and Google will direct you to the book.
That would make a good T-shirt.
There are.
Really?
There are T-shirts. Yes.
We should get some.
Exactly. Although I would prefer, you don't know CSS, which indeed that's true. I don't know CSS.
There's that one that CSS is awesome when it's going outside of the box.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Anyway, so so there are chapters on scope and closures, and you can basically read through, what is scope, scope chain, and the rest of it.
Do you just click those and that's the chapter then?
Yeah, indeed. So, for example, using closures, and then you can go into using closures with examples. So, Carl Simpson's book on JavaScript. I always felt that Carl. Oh, sorry. Is addressing me with his book titles. I think actually the name for You Don't Know JavaScript goes because he was in one of the interviews and somebody told him You Don't Know JavaScript, and he said, "Okay, well I'll write the book about it then," and which he called You Don't Know JavaScript. I kind of admire that level of pettiness.
Brilliant.
Yeah, very good. Or maybe I just butchered that story completely. So if I did, let me know.
So this is a good resource to learn more about closures and JavaScript in general.
Josh says, "Do you say he doesn't know CSS? I thought it was just me." Oh, you'll be surprised. There are way more people that don't know CSS than do.
Oh, there definitely are. Yeah.
Yeah. I still have it on my CV.
So, let's talk prototypes.
Yes. So obviously.
What's one of those?
So let's get. I think that's actually a very good point to bring up. That with this, you don't know JavaScript book. So by default, you will go to second edition. There's a branch for second edition, and some topics will not be covered in the second edition yet because it's kind of work in progress.
Okay.
So
you can
what you need to
switch
do.
onto another one.
Yes, indeed. You need to switch into first edition, but also, there are some translations.
Yeah.
So you can actually have a look at, there are a couple of translation branches. Maybe you can create your own. For example, what is that? That's, there you go. That's even a Ukrainian translation.
I was going to suggest you can translate it into Ukrainian.
No, it's already translated.
Someone's already beaten you to it.
Yeah, someone's already beaten you to it. Okay, so there you go. And then there is first edition, and the first edition will have prototypes. And then you can just go straight to chapter on prototypes.
Is this the same as the prototype chain?
So yes, prototype chain.
It is, yes.
That's the same thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and basically, when the people say that JavaScript is a prototype-based language, that's what they mean. It's all based on the prototype, which is basically think about it like Lego bits. There is like one cube,
yeah,
and you can put them together to make a slightly bigger item. And then you can combine those items into a bigger shape, and then you can create stuff out of that. So that's basically what JavaScript is mainly functioning. So there is like an underlying structure, and then people kind of add bits to it. And usually by adding those bits, people call the resulting prototype something else.
Mm.
Right? So it starts with a prototype.
That can be used.
Yeah, exactly. So for example,
kind of what it says on the tin, then, really.
Yes. Yeah, it's quite tricky to explain a very self-explanatory word in a way, but there we are. So, for example, you can start with an object, you can add property to it, and you can do that pretty much with any object. You can create objects from other objects, which then they kind of, because they're all interlinked, they will share properties, like in that example. And then you basically go ahead with the entirety of the thing. So that's when people say, where does the prototype chain? Because if you go to your browser, for example, yeah. So let's just, for example, let's create const a, and we'll make that an object. Right. So if we say a dot, you would see that there are loads of properties, right? And these are built-in properties. They already exist.
Mm-hmm.
So then if you go to this double underscore, which sometimes people call dunder. Actually, I've never understood why, but just then you will see that that's what it's based on, right? So it's like.
So these are other objects that people have.
Yeah. So that
are built into JavaScript.
Yeah. So the prototype of a object that I have created is this object. So if I go a proto, that will link me to kind of parent object. And then I can say, what's the parent object of that? And it says null, because that's it.
That's the top level.
Yeah, that's the top level. It's object. So that's remember when people say array is actually an object, what they mean is if I create an array, and I say array dot proto, what's that? And when I open it up, it has all these different properties that it inherits from. So that's like, that's where the arrayness comes from. All the methods like .map, reduce, portion, the rest of it. But if I then go to the parent of it, it will tell me that it doesn't really go anywhere. But in the properties over here, there should be like a constructor. Is it?
Yeah, that further at the top.
Oh, there, prototype.
Okay,
So
that's a different constructor.
Yeah, so, and the prototype of it will tell you it's an object. So it inherits parts from an object, the most underlying structure, and the rest of it. So if you ever want to know something, you can then just say const number equals 3. And then you can say num dot proto once again. It will tell you, oh, there you go, here is a number. You then go into, okay, constructor, and then in the property prototype, it will tell you object, and the primitive value is kind of like a default value if you don't set it. So it will tell you from there, you can see that, oh, actually, it's an object. So whatever you pick, everything ends up being an object.
Very good.
So it's kind of like, again, with the Legos, where, yeah, you started with one bit, and then you added a couple. I mean, I hope Lego makes sense, but if you didn't play with Legos or something, then maybe it doesn't. I don't know. Oh, look at that. I think somebody, yeah, double underscore done. I mean, to be fair, it was pretty obvious.
Clarifying that. Thank you,
Yeah.
VJ.
Yeah, well done.
VJ asked a question. Is prototype just another name for parent class, or are they fundamentally different?
So if you're thinking like Java, then it's kind of similar, but kind of also different. Again, like, I feel like the stream is not long enough to go into that. And also, I don't think that I am academically educated enough to be very good at it. But if we oversimplify, it's the same. But there are differences if we do not oversimplify.
Do parent classes exist in JS then?
So again, in JS, it's a little bit tricky because it's prototypes. And actually, I think that's a useful one to show as well. So if we go to, we say const function equals, and then we say function, and let it be an anonymous function, right? So when we say func, we can probably just say, no, sorry, proto, finish that.
I'm getting quite excited here.
And it's
native code.
Yeah, and that is actually different. So
different from what?
Well, it's not an object.
All right.
So with JavaScript, there are like underlying building blocks, which is actually a function. So yes, there are objects, but objects are also functions.
So you may already be about to answer this. When would you create prototypes of an object rather than classes?
So class is a way to create those functions. So again, because I don't know JavaScript, there is a book that can tell me that I can know. Let me just quickly. So the way I also search this book is, let's go to function. And yeah, I think it's in scopes and closures. Or do I have, I wonder if I have bookmarked it somewhere. No. So types, grammar, this object, scope, yeah, it's probably in scope and closures. Yeah, there you go, function. And then from function, so he doesn't cover that in skips and closures. Let me see. I'm basically trying to find what is. Oh, classes. Yeah, there you go. So I remember that I did bookmark it. Cool. So with classes, it's effectively a wrapper around how functions are created. And I hope that he kind of covers that somewhere where they call it. Okay, maybe the best example is class in architecture. Yes. Okay, so hopefully someone has an example of what it looks like. So you can do it through, again, prototype assignments. So someone has a function, vertebrate, okay, cool. Object assign vertebrate, and then you basically say prototype, and you create a function to it, which is walk. And then you can have function bird, function assign. That's a very long answer.
Going through the entire animal kingdom.
Yes, but I think eventually they do get to the point where. Oh, okay, cool. So vertebrate with a function creating. So that's like manually creating all of this. When what you can do instead is then use class-based syntax that is kind of short-circuiting a lot of this prototypal boilerplate that you will need to write, right? So you say const function, and then you like do some reflections and assign them to prototypes and stuff, and you add all of those. So instead, JavaScript has just said, you know what, here is a class syntax. So instead of you writing all of this, just use this keyword, define your functions, and we will do all of this annoying boilerplate for you. So you don't have to do it. So to answer your question, objects and classes, usually, if you have studied Java or in a CS class, when you think about objects and classes, you usually think that object is derived from a class. So when you create a class, that's an object. But it's kind of a little bit more nuanced than that in JavaScript. Kind of like with a plus and minus sign, because they are lexically, when we say class and object, we mean ever so slightly different things in JavaScript. And it can be a little bit confusing, because if you come from Java and somebody says, should I use objects or classes, it doesn't quite make sense because they're not interchangeable.
So a couple of people said here, I had JavaScript classes are just syntactic sugar over prototypes.
Yes, so basically that's. Let me just
probably clarify what is syntactic sugar.
Syntactic sugar is like software engineer way of saying an easier way to do something. So instead of writing a lot of code, you have an easier way to do it.
A shortcut.
Yeah.
And as Kid Alex says, I learned it as classes being syntactic sugar, a syntax that makes things easier, but underneath it's all prototypes.
Correct.
Ed said, has always been a me.
Yes, that's correct. Exactly. Which is why, the objects are not quite related to it. But also, coincidentally, once you create a class, an instance of a class is an object.
Remember that.
So it's kind of, yeah. I do feel like I probably confuse people more than I have clarified.
Let's go. Oh, which one? Functional programming. Functional programming. Let's go with this.
Sure.
Because I feel like, at least from what I've seen, it's much simpler than it appears. So what is functional programming?
So there are functional programming is like a term for a handful of ways to write code.
Yeah.
Which mainly, are all around functions. So there are a couple of main principles that functional programming also does. That is quite useful to know. Because usually it kind of helps you prevent a couple of bugs, just if you are aware of doing things like that way.
Okay.
So coincidentally, the same author wrote the book called Functional Like JavaScript, which is basically, functional programming can be a little bit intense, and there is a lot of terminology which is even more confusing than object-oriented programming.
And this is the light version. So
yeah, and basically it's kind of like the
Enjoy.
light, so you don't have to worry too much. And how do you create functions, manage inputs? But the main bits about functional programming is like immutability, which is you do not update inputs, right? So if your function receives inputs, you don't mutate them, like you just leave them be. You return new outputs. So that's what we mean by that is, if you have a function and it takes an argument, let's say, an argument of name, and let's say first name, last name, and the function is like get full name, right?
Yep.
But what you want to do is you want to say return first name space last name.
Can you do that? Yeah, plus.
Yeah. So with that,
wait, is that gonna work?
Let's see. Your full name. A. Obviously, it will be a bit buggy because if actually no, if you give us a number, it should work.
Yeah.
But if you name your child a number, that's okay.
Okay, that has worked. Good.
Yeah, but I think
you would need to shut the first one, the first name one.
Yeah.
And then
space.
Yeah.
Dollar. There we go. That's forward. Cool. Yeah. AB. Anyway.
There we go.
So if you create that, but what functional programming doesn't want you to do is, for example, if you say then first name equals A, B, or try to mutate it some way.
Maybe we should do CD just to. Yeah.
So what functional programming doesn't want you to do is basically try to mutate any of the inputs as you have already received them. And I think that's like fairly mathematical way of putting it. So
What does that say?
function of n, I think it looks. Fn. In. Yes, and I think VJ basically, he says pure functions. Exactly.
Isn't that first name and last name? You just have.
Oh yeah, of course, because it's the last. Right. Yes. Good stuff. Yeah, thank you. Pure functions, indeed. So, and also it's called reduce side effects. Yes. So what you. Yes. So with all of it.
Sorry, this is a pure function, or it's not now.
So right now, this is now not pure function.
Because
it has side effects. Right. So if you change your inputs, they call it side effects.
Even if that's what you want it to do.
So when you're trying to write functional code, you avoid it as much as possible. And I think there are even ways to tell, there are linters that's set up that will tell you that you update arguments, you mutate functions.
Mhm.
Or you have a function that mutates stuff, or you are mutating arguments, there is a side effect, don't do it. So to make it pure, you basically try to avoid doing any of it.
Mhm.
And if you need to create some kind of update, what you instead do is you return a new value.
So what would that look like here? So this person AB has changed their first name to, let's go with P.
So what you would do instead is, so instead of mutating first name, last name, if you say, you know what, we're actually going to ignore their first name because it doesn't matter, and they will always be, I don't know. Ms. You just return a completely different value instead of trying to update first name to your value that you want.
I suppose what I'm getting at is sometimes you do have to update things. So how does that fit into functional programming?
Right. So that's what they say. Like, for example, if you have, some people say that it means not having any side effects.
Mm-hmm.
But not having any side effects taken to the extreme means that you never update databases.
Yes.
Because then
Yeah.
no updates can ever be made. So there are obviously exceptions made for, when updates need to be made. But the main principle is...
This is what Mac Tuka says. Side effect is to change something unintentionally. Something does an extra unwanted thing.
Yes, correct.
So how does this actually... How do you apply functional programming then? Is it something you do via linters or just a force of habit?
That's kind of a lot, combination of everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are also helping bits to it, like, for example, JavaScript map function. So 1, 2, 3, right? So you can say map. And map function, by definition, returns new value. So it doesn't actually do anything with this array that you give it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the... That's why people say, functional programming, whenever they teach you functional programming in JavaScript, they always go to map, filter, reduce.
Because it's built into those functions.
And coincidentally, mapping, filtering, reducing is like the 3 most basic functional programming paradigms.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what you do. You take inputs, you can map over them, you either remove certain from them, or you combine them in a certain way, which is reducing.
So how does this compare to... Oh, I can't find it now. OOP.
So OOP is object-oriented programming, which is you create... I think there was a question like, I thought that objects...
Here we go. Maverick Mining, OOP.
Yeah, and I think if you scroll down a couple, there is one tagged. Yeah, that one.
This?
The start code. Yeah, that's the one. So I thought objects are created from classes. Yeah, so they are instances of classes. So class is like a drawing of a building.
Yeah.
And once you apply that drawing, you have a building.
So it sounds like what Donny64 said is right then.
Correct.
Okay.
But the term is instance.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ask me why.
Probably to do with...
It's like a unique... Yeah,
Oh.
unique one thing derived from something.
Yeah.
See what I mean? English is quite a funny language.
It is.
Yeah. So the difference between functional programming and OOP is that they're not... I don't know. It's kind of like comparing apples and oranges, Like you can say that you prefer one fruit to another, but fundamentally they're just different fruits. If you want to have an apple pie, it would be very hard to make it out of an orange.
Yeah.
So it kind of depends what you're trying to do. Like if you're trying to write a piece of code that has very defined hierarchical structures, then I feel like OOP is it kind of makes sense. A lot of the time though, hierarchies and structures are kind of a little bit fluid. Like they apply here but don't apply there, you know. Which is why a lot of OOP examples are a little bit contrived, you know, like vertebrate, bird, parrot.
Well, it applies somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're writing software for like
The Natural History Museum.
Yeah, like Theory of Evolution or something, you know, to illustrate a tree, it kind of makes sense. But sometimes like when you actually write real life code, you kind of realize that a lot of these structures are very hard to map one onto another because there is always a bit of an exception.
So people might be wondering, do I need to know exactly what OOP and functional programming are, or can I just learn JS?
I think so I would suggest you learn JS. But you also read up a little bit about what's OOP, what's FP, and how if you structure your code using FP practices, what does that look like? And if you structure your code using OOP practices, what does that look like?
You could ask ChatGPT.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. Actually, you can. But if you're looking for book recommendations, then I really shared Functional Light JS previously. And if you're looking for an OOP book, I think there is one like called 99 Bottles of OOP. There you go. Yes, there is a book about that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically JS, PHP, and Ruby. But again, you're looking for JS, so there is a book with JS examples of like how to structure your code in OOP manner, and it basically covers that.
Harper says you'll learn OOP and FP the more you learn CS and make projects using both.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then Michael Ember's thrown another one into the mix: imperative programming.
Yeah, so there are a lot of paradigms how to write your code. You know, and I feel like a lot of the time we as developers try to say, you know, which one is superior and is applied most of the time. But, you know, it just really depends. Like sometimes you just need to write your code. Like if you're writing the script, it would be declarative. But like React is imperative.
Is it?
I think so. So it's.
I think it might be declarative. It says in our React course.
Oh yeah, in that case it is. Oh yeah, sorry. Imperative is
Let's
like a
check.
No, imperative is. I always confuse the two. So imperative is like writing a script because you tell it exactly what to do at any given time. So, for example, go to the DOM, grab this element, update this bit. That's imperative. But declarative is like, I want this to happen, and this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think. I was too busy scrolling through Bob's slides. Well, in this Learn React course, which is free, somewhere near the beginning.
Declarative, Hopper says, declarative is writing all the steps. I always get myself spinned. Well, basically, one of them is that and declarative versus imperative. This is procedural. I think I meant procedural. Damn it. No, imperative, there you go. Step-by-step instructions.
No, look.
Declarative, ordering a pizza without being concerned about steps it takes to make it. Yeah, exactly. So there you go.
So this point 7. Why React? It's declarative.
Yeah, so I'm afraid Harper, it's the opposite.
No.
Yeah. Imperative is given step by step, and declarative, I may have it backwards. Yes, and
summarizing what you should do.
Yes, and
a thought-provoking question. Though. Thank you for this.
But yeah, I think as you can see, it's okay to sometimes have it backwards because they are two very similar words.
can you tell us, just to finish up, a little bit about modern JavaScript tooling, transpilers and bundlers? And the reason I ask this is sometimes the dev team talks about, oh, it's the bundler. And I'm like, oh, the bundler, yeah. What is that?
So with when you're writing code, especially in JavaScript, quite often you do need some extra tooling to make sure that this code runs, or just in general, like how do English words get translated into something that computer can do?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these tools is basically, compilers, interpreters, and if you're going further up a level, certain syntax is not supported. Like, for example, they say ES6, ES5, and all that stuff. So basically, it's all about trying to either update existing code. So, for example, if there is no support for class, like the browser does not understand what class is, then you need to have
one old browser, isn't it?
Yeah, like IE 11, for example, didn't support class syntax.
Thankfully, that's gone.
Yeah, so you had to have a transpiler that would take the class syntax and convert it into that previously what we saw on stream prototype syntax.
Mm-hmm.
So it basically just does that automatic work for you. And a bundler is just different type of tooling, which so for example, you write your code in TypeScript, but you want to, for example, those types, they do nothing on, when you ship your JavaScript to the browser, it does nothing. So what you want to do is basically you want to take all of your code, all of your CSS, which is probably written in something like Tailwind. So you basically want to put it all together, bundle it all up, do whatever work, like, for example, remove types from TypeScript, convert it to whatever syntax needs to happen, convert your Tailwind into proper CSS that the browser understands. And then you basically bundle it all together and you have a final bundle.
Yep.
Which is HTML, CSS, JavaScript.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a category of tools which does it for you, so you don't have to do it yourself. And they're like Webpack, Vite, Snowpack, plenty of them. They all, most of them have something to do with pack. And it's quite useful to learn how these tools work because, for example, if you use Scrimba, you might want to run your scrim locally, which means that you download the scrim and you need to invoke a couple of commands that will do stuff for you. So it's all of these words are usually to do with tooling surrounding JavaScript ecosystem, which is, unfortunately, sometimes it does take more time to deal with than writing actual JavaScript.
Right. Good stuff to know.
Yeah.
In an interview. I love Vite. It's the fastest way to create.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I think a lot of people use Vite now. It's very straightforward to use. The doc's pretty good, and the config is not as intense, I suppose.
Onerous.
Yeah. But I think from scratch, it would be quite useful, if you have, now with Vite, React apps are fairly straightforward, but, try to, for example, set up React project with different bundlers. Try Webpack, try Vite, compare them, try to add Sass to it or Tailwind, and see what kind of config you need to change, and then just go from there.
Yes. Serp says, IE will never die, just like Float. He will laugh. Poly fails to help with legacy browser support.
Yes.
Oh boy, aren't those fun? Yeah. Remember having to write polyfills for IE. Oh boy. Yes. Brilliant. Well, thank you.
The helper says never used Webpack. I mean, give it a go. It's still out there. So I know that most people use Vite and most people try to migrate to Vite, but there is a high chance that once you get a job, you might have a Webpack config.
Yeah, legacy code at least, or maybe not.
Yeah,
Maybe
it could be a
not.
very updated app, or just developers are really keen on Webpack.
Yeah. Good. Well, I think that's all we have time for today. Thank you all for coming and asking your thought-provoking questions as usual. Very good. We will be back in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
I don't actually remember the topic. Let's go and have a look.
Uh,
Live stream calendar. Deploying front-end applications. So that's something to look forward to. It's not on our YouTube yet, but it will be very soon. Hope to see you all back there. Yes.
Nice one. Okay, and enjoy your weekend.
When it comes.
When it comes. Yeah, not today, tomorrow.
Yes. Bye, everyone.